I like it. I like where your head's at, Miss
Okay, as
Nelson.
close as I could get, I almost wore my Auburn shirt. I promise you this is not
Michelle, you want something? Can't take that easy. He has a big screen right there. I know you guys will be disappointed. Almost forgot.
I was going to ask if we had handouts.
I know 6 was 4. War and peace. Cover. It's all a red.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't mean we're red.
I have some extras too.
You had insomnia. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
I think I see a typo, it makes 350.
The real problem is an extra zero. Y'all take that down.
You left off a 0 for I.
Yeah. You have PowerPoint printouts?
Eloise sent it electronic. I typically do.
I know. That's what I take. That's
All right.
sorry.
After 5 minutes.
I won't.
All right. I think we have to call you one time. We'll get it on
3
the
minutes.
timer.
And turn the little timer on.
It's
You have
ticking.
3 minutes, John. That could be-
All right, I think we have to call an official meeting. I like that challenge. We go in auctioneer mode. Record time. I think we have to call an official meeting to get it started.
Oh, I thought I did before. I was still here.
Oh, maybe
I
we
did,
did.
that
I
right?
don't think we did.
Okay.
Go for it.
Oh, yeah. Calling to order the budget hearing for September 2nd, 21.
All right. How many people are looking online? One.
One person.
Yes. All right. All righty. Let's get started. So, unfortunately, I don't have as many jokes and memes as I usually have because this was a pretty stressful period, and we were right up to the finish line getting all this finalized. But again, stop me anytime, have dialogue, have conversations. I will just we'll just keep rolling along. All right. So here's the summary of the 2022 budget. All right. Good night, everyone. Oh. All righty. So a couple of things, and again, I'm going to drill down into all of these things. You can see the bottom line here, $560 million. That's not going to be $560 million that we're going to spend this fiscal year. There are a lot of things, and I want to get into those details as we go down the slides, whether it be capital construction or some of the ESSER funds that's going to be spent over multiple years. We're just required to account for that. The state requires that, the budget allocations in this fiscal year, and they will roll over. So just as a recap, as we kind of walk through all the different layers here, Everybody knows that we have 5 main governmental funds. You know, this next slide kind of shows the details of that. Again, the general fund is the main fund. That's where most of all of our operational funds are coming out of. It's where our state and most of our earmarked funds are. And so basically, that is what I report on every month when I'm giving the update, because that is the primary operating functions of the school system come out of the general fund. Special revenue. Well, special revenue is right here, list items that are earmarked for specific purposes. So federal revenue, title, IDA, local school, public revenue is coming into this fund. We also have C&P revenue. We have the half-cent sales tax that we share with the county commissioner and coastal because it's earmarked is coming into special revenue. Really the only thing that's not earmarked in the special revenue is the state foundation funds because they consider that operational, and that's why it's in the general fund. Debt service, pretty self-explanatory. That's covering a lot of our principal and interest payments on our debt service. Capital projects is covering a lot of our construction as well as some of our capitalized repairs that happen throughout existing school systems. We also are buying buses, and we're covering the state pooled warrant out of that fund. Fiduciary, these are the non-public funds that are at the local school level. Alrighty, so that's a breakdown of all 5 of the funds. So looking at total budget revenue for this year, and I'm going to go through, you see some big jumps here, and I'm going to drill down into these to further explain it. But like I said, a lot of these revenues, yes, we have them in the budget for this year because we're required to put the allocation, but they're going to be received and they're going to be spent over a multi-year period, if that makes sense. So you can see we got our state revenue, a big jump in there. A big part of that is the capital bond. Federal revenue, a big jump is ESSER. Local revenue, I'm going to walk through that. And other revenue is really miscellaneous things. Majority, if we sell goods on gov deal and those type of things, it's things that are kind of hard to estimate in budget because it's based on the resale value and some of our items that go into kind of surplus mode. Typically, I would show the 22 budget, and I'll show the original 22, and I would show the original 21 budget when I do this comparison, just to give the most accurate year over year. I showed the 21 amended budget because a lot happened in FY21. We had the ESSER funds. Also, when I was doing this presentation this time last year, there were still a lot of unknowns with the coronavirus and what our revenue was going to end. And the amended allows for me to kind of show some of these things, to show a little bit more accurate of a comparison, and also kind of show where we have kind of budgeted up some of our local revenue based on what the actual was showing this school year. So I thought it was a more accurate comparison. Typically, original to original kind of meets that requirement. Should I be talking into the mic? I just realized that.
Get a little Mick Jagger going on.
There we go. Them moves like Jagger.
That mic's not talking.
Was it like Freddie Prinze? I would walk around with like half of the mic. Yeah. Not Freddie Prinze, Freddie Mercury. You know, but you guys know what I was talking about. All discombobulated today. All righty. Where was I? Okay. All right. Here's what I love so much about the budget hearing, and it's all the graphs. I know you guys get excited about these too. Typically, federal funding is about 8% of our revenue. It's double this year because of the CARE Act and the ESSER funding. Typically, our local and state revenue is almost equal to each other. It's higher on this because of that one-time capital bond. And so you can see the one-time revenue sources have really kind of skewed this way outside what we typically see year over year. State revenue. You can kind of see the breakdown here. Again, obviously, the biggest item is the foundation program. And what I'm going to do here is kind of individually kind of walk through these different categories so everyone understands where we are. You can see the capital outlay is one of the main reasons why we're seeing such a big increase here. But before we walk through everything, let's talk about the foundation program. And you can see the difference here between 21 and 22 was a $1.1 million decline. So, as everybody knows, the foundation program is driven by ADM, and ADM represents the average daily membership 20 days after Labor Day. And so when we get into October, we send that report up to the state. that is really the driving factor of many aspects of our funding. You can see last year, so again, this is October of 2020 enrollment numbers. So I know it's kind of confusing because of the different fiscal years and that kind of stuff, but you can see that we had an ADM decline of 486 kids. That was standard. Last year was a crazy year. This year is a crazy year as well. Probably not quite as crazy from the standpoint of the virtual school and the transferring here and out. When looking at the individual grades and looking at the decline, we saw our biggest decline in kindergarten, and I think that was pretty standard throughout the state of Alabama, just because kindergarten is not a requirement in the state of Alabama to attend. So when parents were uncertain and a lot of, and roughly, just that unknown factor at the start of last year, I think encouraged a lot of parents to err on the side of caution and not enroll their kindergartners, and that was where a big change is. Again, all the grades had to change, but that was the largest. And like I said before, this was quite an anomaly. I had ADM numbers, I think, going back to 82. I can get them back going further, but that was as much energy as I had at the time. And we grew year over year, every single year for the last almost 40 years. The only year that we didn't was the Gulf Shores split, but if you took Gulf Shores out, we still grew. So this shows what a strange year last year was. Again, everything is driven by your ADM, your divisors for teachers specifically is driven. And so that decline resulted in a 32 teacher loss. You can see we had 2 principals that were added on this one. So last year we locally funded the virtual school principal and the Bell Forest principal because they weren't included in the ADM report. This year they are, so that's explaining that change. Assistant principals, that is also following the enrollment in the schools. We earned 37 assistant principals. We locally fund 28 assistant principals, and we have 65 countywide. So you can kind of see we continue to go over and above what the state provides. Same thing with counselors here. We earned 55 counselors, and we locally fund an additional 22 for 77 counselors countywide. Not a big change in librarians, and then some of the CareerTech allocation stayed the same, so you can see there was a net 36 unit change based on that ADM drop. So if you apply all of that, and they come out with the salaries of these 1,888 employees based on their degree and their experience. Now you can see here that even though we lost some teachers, we still had an increase on the salary, and that's because of the 2% state raise. That was factored into that. You can see here, really the only aspect of the foundation program that we actually have some discretion on how to spend it is called other current expenses here. We can see that went up by $894 per teacher unit. 100% of other current expenses being used for classified staff. Because you can see that your front office and your janitors and a lot of those other positions are not included in the foundation program formula. So we cover as many of those as we possibly can using the other current expense allocation there. And I kind of walk through, I think we have over 500 employees there, and then we cover the remaining locally. Looking at some of the classroom support dollars, CIS, it went up from $600 to $700 a unit. That's good. So I think that's the highest level of support that we've seen in a long time, as far as the availability of $700. So that $700 is for every single teacher in the entire district. And so we have the Class Wallet program. The Class Wallet program sets up a virtual wallet. And so everybody is loaded $700 and then go on Amazon and about 30 other vendors, and they can purchase what they need for their classroom. And so that's really helped streamline that process. So we're not running around with PO numbers, and we're not worried about someone getting charged tax and someone else. And so
To remind everybody close to the end of the year, hey, spend your money, use it or lose it.
Not to the extent that we used to. So Class Wallet has helped in that regards, and Class Wallet sends automatic reminders every time they log in. So one of the things too with the CIS dollars, typically the state makes these available October 1. What we've been able to do using Class Wallet is to make these available July 1, which makes sense. Everything July 1 makes sense to me. I hate that we're on an October 1 fiscal year in Alabama, but that's a topic for a whole nother day. But we front load that, and we're able to do that because of the ease of having to manage that through Class Wallet. And so that allows teachers to utilize these at the start of the school year, and then we close it off in May. So that's what we tell them. Again, you were supposed to use it for the school year, and so the reason why we shut it off in May is so we don't commingle multiple fiscal years of funds, gives us a month to reload, and then the next year is available July 1. So I think it's been successful.
The teachers are using their CIS funds before they go and solicit foundations or free-meal tax committees or any other available resources?
That's a very good question. That's the good thing about Class Wallets. We have the reporting capability to verify that. So if a teacher has set up an Amazon wish list and they still have $700 they haven't spent, then we've had the ability to say, hey, spend the state CIS, because we can't roll that forward before you go asking anybody anything else.
And don't you look at that when you're looking at the special tax district stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
Looking at what they're spending.
And that's good with Class Wallet, because we can run reports and we can see who spent what and how they spent, and we can make sure there's no duplication. There also streamlines the approval process. And so again, it's got to be used in the classroom, and so many times it goes to the bookkeeper and to the principal, and they can make sure that it's not being used in any type of other function before it's approved. So
That's $700 per unit. Is that per foundation funded unit or just?
they fund foundation, we fund everybody. So we cover everybody, whether it be federal or local or even 3 mil locally.
The reports that you're talking about, to make sure the spending is appropriate, does that ever go to curriculum, or oversight in any way, or just as principal?
Right now, because it's a lot. Every single purchase for every single teacher, and they could have multiple ones. It's just staying at the local school level. Now, if Renee wants that, we can give her access to it, and we can have it email her every time someone asks something. So, yeah.
Ms. Whitlander we work really close with her with the federal funds to make sure
Yes.
it's not in line with the curriculum and you're not, doing teacher pay teacher or something like that. It's not in line. So we do that with her. Like I said, that's such another.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because part of the goals, and I've talked to Ashley about this, is start using Class Wallet on some of the title funds. Build that extra electronic wallet and load some of your Title I funds and help streamline that process as well. So for the other funds here, technology, library enhancement, professional development, I don't know why the state continues to do that, because they've never funded it since I've been in this role. The teachers have to vote on a committee. So all the teachers have to nominate their peers to serve on a committee, and that committee, based on the foundation allocations at their school, will vote on a budget. They'll send that budget out to all the rest of the staff, who then will approve it. So it's a process, and the law requires that process, and we got to take minutes and have the committee and approval and all of these type of things. But the intent of that is for everybody to have a voice, and for the representation at every school for the use of these funds. Because as you can see, if you've got 30, 40 teachers at $500 a teacher, you've got a substantial amount of money coming in here. Is to have a voice and a vote to make sure it's being used as majority in the school would like it to be used. We saw a $150 increase in technology. Library enhancement is the same thing. We encourage them to include the librarian into this process. It stayed the same, and professional development stayed the same at $100 per unit. This is one where I do kind of have to stay on top of everybody to spend it. There's a lot that we provide from a technology basis. And so, and with professional development last year, we had some challenges and a lot of things got canceled. And so where Class Wallet has helped streamline the CIS, we still have to make sure that everybody is on track and we don't have a big balance come the end of September, and then we're in a situation where we have to write a check back to the school. So that's what I tell them, we do not want to give any money back to the state. So textbooks stayed the same at $75 per ADM, bringing about $2.2 million there. We're able to supplement a lot of the ESSER funds to go over and above that. So you can see before the 10 mil match, we saw an increase of $1.6 million, and a lot of that was driven through an increase in the amount per units and the 2% raise that came here. Now, if you combine the last two slides together, you see the picture in that typically based on the ADM of 29,554, we should earn 186. The 10 mil match brings us down to 143. So Gulf Shores has helped in regards to the 10 mil match. In that, and again, another confusing aspect is that's taking the property values from 2 years ago, and that's what's being included in your 10 mil match requirement. So it creates an interesting situation that property values plummet because it's taking the valuation from 2 years and you're taking the valuation from now as far as the calculation from the foundation standpoint. And so we saw a $2 million increase in the foundation program there, and I guess everyone can see it. Valuations are increasing faster and faster and faster, and the property market is just on fire. Whether or not that's sustainable is a discussion for another day, but that brings us to that $1.1 million decline there, looking at the net state foundation funding. Let's talk about the teacher stabilization funding. This is a one-time appropriation, and this was because so many different school systems lost enrollment because of the coronavirus. And the intent of this was that these students are going to come back. A lot of them were kindergartners. They're going to be forced to come back. And so what the state did is they allocated $100 million to go to schools that had a declining ADM. And so how that calculation was done is that they took $6,271 per student and they times it by this 486, and they gave us an additional $3,048,960 to help use that, because we have seen it. They are coming back. The growth is coming. That funds around 35 teacher units when you include salaries and benefits. Again, one time, but for a growing system like ours, very manageable. For a system that's declining, this kind of puts them in an interesting position because they have one-time funds, knowing that they're probably still going to decline. We don't have to worry about that. I feel good. This helped us address a lot of the gaps. The biggest thing that helped us address the gaps is the virtual schools. Now, you guys probably remember this time last year I was very excited because we got a cost center for the virtual elementary school. And Mr. Craig allowed us to get it a year early. So typically how that works, if you have a new school, on their October ADM report, they have to have over 250 kids. And then in April, you apply to the state to have that considered a cost center. It's included in the ADM report for the next year, and then the funding becomes available. So there's a 2-year lag time there. I knew because we had 8,000 kids in the virtual school, and we were hiring over 100 positions to fulfill that without touching, in the most part, many of the positions out of brick and mortar schools. I knew that was going to dig us into a hole. And it did. And you probably remember last year, and I made that comment last year, is that cost us over $12 million, but we were going down into a hole with the ladder. And because I knew that we had the cost center approval, I knew the next year we have a ladder and we climb right out of it. And I'm going to mention that a couple of times in this presentation. But let's get into specifics here. So looking at the virtual elementary school, so if you look at the October 2020 ADM numbers, it came in at 1,957. That they earned 117 teacher units. What we projected they were going to need for this school year was 30 teacher units. That means 87 teacher units were flexed out to elementary schools throughout the district, which makes perfect sense because a lot of the virtual elementary school students that were there in October are now back at their brick and mortar schools. Looking at the virtual high school, based on their October 2020 ADM, it was 2,406 kids. That earns 160 teacher units. That we projected they were going to need around 31 teacher units for this school year. That gave us 99 teacher units that we could flex out. So you can see together that gave us the ability to flex out 186 teacher units back to the brick and mortar schools. And that's why I was so excited about that. And I knew that was the ability to do it. That's why it's so critically important to, if you're going to do a virtual school, do it internally. If we would have contracted out with somebody, and most of those contracts state that you're going to pass through the state funding you get by the schools that enroll in the virtual school, it would have been a very bad financial situation because they would have seen the proceeds of this, knowing that all these kids moved back to their brick and mortar school in the middle of the year, and we would have had no funding or no ability to deal with that. So that's why I've always been a champion of making sure we can do this internally because we can manage it and we can reap the benefits of doing that. You go. Woo, thank you, Homer. Somebody was listening. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo. Got to do it backwards like Homer does, yeah. Yeah, that's hard, Homer. That's a skill. It's backwards. So again, 186 teacher units. That's the financial implication of around $13 million. So I just wanted to highlight this. Again, the virtual school is down to a much more manageable level. But again, we hope we can continue to see it grow. Again, not anything like we saw last year, but continues to sustain because it does continue to offer these benefits. Now, these benefits are not going to be here for this next year because their ADM is much, much, much smaller. But there's still a benefit.
Speaking of ADM, did the elementary school ever make a cost?
So the elementary school did make a call center. One of the provisions that we did just to ensure it, because we were a little bit nervous, is that we moved 7th and 8th graders from the high school call center to the elementary call center, making that a K-8, bringing their enrollment to about 350. The high school is around 300. So again, very manageable. But if we could get both of these schools up to around 500 students, then I think we're in a very, very sweet spot. All righty, Teams Act. So you guys approved a lot of these contracts just before the budget hearing, but let me kind of give you a John Wilson budget overview here. So as you know, for the Teams Act, you have to have a valid certificate in either science or math. You must teach full-time an approved course by the state. There are multiple contract levels depending on the advanced credentials. And that is depending whether you're working towards getting your national boards or your STEAM, or you already have it. And there's also a third contract. So if you're working towards it, it's preliminary. If you already have it, it's advanced. There's a third one that if you have 20 years of experience and your national board, what is that one called?
It's an advanced contract.
Okay. What's the?
Stipulation.
Oh, okay.
Worked at least 20 years.
Got it. So you got kind of multiple advanced contracts there. One of the big things here is that a participating teacher voluntarily relinquishes tenure status under the Students First Act. And again, you know, these are teachers in a much, much, much needed field. And so, again, that's kind of one of the provisions for the extra pay. So there's also a $5,000 supplement for a hard-to-staff school. Now, hard to staff was not me and Tiffany sitting into a room and like, this school is hard to staff. No, this was from the State Department of Education. I assume they were looking at certain poverty levels when they came up with this list, but this was not internally driven. Just as an FYI, I don't want anybody to say, well, John, what are you doing to do this? I don't really know how they do this, but this is the list they gave us. A Teams teacher at any of these schools, and you might say, why is it an elementary school? Because it's 6th grade and up. So any of the elementary schools that have 6th grade, technically under the law, they could qualify for Teams, can get an extra $5,000 supplement. So let's look. So what I have here, this is a 9-month teacher with a master's. This is Teams, and this is non-Teams. This is regular. So looking at that, if you kind of look at these first couple steps, you're looking at an average of about $11,000 increase from where it typically was. Now, you start to see that inch up as we're getting into step 7 and 8 and 9. And when you're looking at between 9 and 26, you're looking at almost an $18,000 per year increase. Substantial. So let me kind of throw out a real world application for you so you can kind of see what this could mean potentially. Scroll down to my notes so I don't mess this up. Okay. So let's say I'm John Wilson. I work at Foley High School as a math teacher, and I want to do the Teams contract, and I've been working there for 10 years. So let's use that example. So I would qualify for the advanced contract because I already have my national boards. Because math is fun. I'm teaching a special math Excel class. I got approved by the state, so I'm in my element. So $77,000 would be what I would make, plus another $5,000 supplement because I'm in a hard to staff school. Plus the state will give any teacher that completes their national boards, they've been doing it for years now, an additional $5,000 supplement. So guess what? That brings me to $87,000. And then I'm like, you know what? I think I want to help out and pick up a bus route. So let's say I grab a bus route and that averages around $15,000 a year. I am now a 9-month math teacher making $102,000 a year. So this is pretty substantial. And then I get a summer job, and then bam, you know.
Are you a local unit, a state unit?
Good question. This is a state unit. So you know, and we're having to tell we're having to tell principals again. I recommend if you have a science or math teacher, use a foundation unit to do that. What happens when they apply for this, then the state gives us the difference between the state matrix and the teams matrix, and it's all state funded. Now, one of the things I had, and I've mentioned this, that we currently pay our teachers over the state matrix. It's 4.5% over. And so if I were to use our existing matrix and not adjust that for teams, then it kind of skews the difference. So I took the state, so our state matrix, the Baldwin County salary schedule was 4.5% over the state matrix for any employee or any teacher. The Baldwin County teams is 4.5% over the state team state matrix. Does that, everybody follow me there? This is Baldwin County, so the state will cover everything up to that extra 4.5%, and we're going to cover that locally. And I think that's good that we continue to have a competitive advantage, continue to get the best teachers from around the region. And I got a cool slide on that too. Get excited, woo! All right, woo! It's getting warm in here. Woo, Frank! You turn the air way up.
He already did. Did you see him crawling?
Woo! All right. Woo, reminds me of my house right now with the AC broken. That's another story. All right, so let's talk about all the other miscellaneous state funding items that roll into that total amount that I showed here. That's right, Frank, get on that. All right, I talked about the foundation program. I talked about the teacher stabilization. Transportation, this is for operational funds. We saw an increase of about $134,000. To run our schools, the operational cost of running our school buses in this county, we still spend about $13.5 million. So we're still having to implement about $1 million over and above this amount to make sure we have the bus drivers and the fuel and the supplies and everything we need to efficiently run it. That hasn't changed. That's pretty standard because we keep growing. Every time we think we're going to catch our breath, we grow again, and we got to get in front of that, and that's the same with everything else. Capital outlay. Yes, ma'am. Everything is funded in arrears. So transportation, instead of using ADM, they take the route report from the previous year and then it's funded for the next year. Yes, ma'am. Unfortunately, that's not included in Chris Elliott's bill doing the route changes because that would get way too confusing even for me. And then to try to explain that to everybody in Montgomery, we tried to keep it on the students. But yeah, it's based on the current year route report and the number of routes is tying into the operational cost. Capital outlay here. So I use capital outlay to address a lot of the issues with our existing facilities, whether that's paying, updating boilers, HVAC units, replacing the floors, renovating the bathrooms. I will go over, I've got that list, so that's coming too. Everything, we have about $2 million of a state pooled warrant that we have to pull out of this. That was taken probably 27 years ago because we're about 3 years from getting that paid off. So still paying off Gene McCutcheon's debt. I almost stopped. Gene! Yeah. All righty. OSR. So I could, I have a lot to say about OSR, but because we want to not be here all day, I'm just going to leave it that again, we saw a modest increase. Now, OSR is a good program. I just have issue that we have to use over $2 million of title funds to fully fund the program. I also have issue that it's a completely different bureaucratic organization in Montgomery. It makes a whole lot more sense to abolish that I'm gonna get in trouble, to abolish the bureaucratic organization and include 4-year-olds in the ADM report so you can offer it to everybody. But what do I know? So I just probably made somebody upset on the camera, but only one person's watching, so we're good so far. Fleet renewal. So this is based on the buses that are 10 years or less as far as the age. We've done a lot to try to stabilize this. You're going to see some variations year over year because we do have some special needs buses that we continue to do over 10 years. But in average, we purchase around 30 buses a year to try to get us on a good rotation. Where we're not purchasing 100 buses in 1 year, and 10 years later, we have 100 buses that fall off from a funding standpoint. The Alabama Reading Initiative. Okay, so the state didn't give me this allocation until like last week. I don't know what the issue was there. I was anticipating that we would see at least a 2% increase there. They kept it the same. They actually left out one of our elementary schools, and so I'm going back and forth with them, trying to get that clarified, but that's where we are for right now. This is a good right here. We've said year over year over year over year that in Montgomery they're not valuing what nurses bring to a school system. I think coronavirus has brought that to light. I think people are realizing the value of having an RN nurse in every school does a lot. Now, they increased by $251,000, which is about a 24% increase. We go from funding about 14 nurses to funding about 19 nurses, but hey, it's a step in the right direction. So we probably have about 80 RN and LPNs that service kids throughout the county. We'll continue to get on that bandwagon, and hopefully this trend will continue. At risk, we saw that increase by $57,000, where majority of that funding is going towards the social workers that are at each of our high schools. CareerTech, operations and maintenance, that's for materials and supplies, and for countywide CareerTech programs. A lot of that goes to individual programs at the different high schools. This was one that we saw a big bump last year. So again, this is another one I've been preaching about. We're continuing to see our ESL numbers, our English as a second language, go up every year, and it's very, very challenging. Last year, we went from like $150,000 to $633,000. I was like, thank you, whoever lobbied that in Montgomery, because it's much needed. We saw a $60,000 increase in this fiscal year. So again, that's great to see. As we continue to see record budgets up in Montgomery, let's make sure that we can apply it to the areas that's always been severely, severely underfunded, and ESL is one of those. This is another one in fact, I thought this was a misprint when I got the allocation. Preschool, specifically this is special ed preschool. So you can see last year we got $245,000. This year we got right under $800,000. That's huge. Special ed preschool presents a lot of challenges, and what I will show in a slide down the way is that federal funding doesn't even remotely cover the needs for our 5 to 18-year-olds, but the federal requirement is that we take them from 3 to 21, and so we were having to utilize foundation and local and mix up the two based on the circumstances to try to cover as many teachers that were doing specifically special ed preschool in a lot of our schools. Yes. Okay. No, you're good. Yes, ma'am.
The difference between OSR, PreK, and preschool is?
That's a good question. So OSR Preschool is a completely separate bureaucratic organization that's not tied into the State Department of Education that offer grants. Now, every single one of those grants, you have to match. That's why I'm like, again, yes. And they're not doing SPED. And we've talked to them, we're like, can we please incorporate a special ed aspect into OSR for preschool? And, again, and they're like, no, our statute doesn't allow that. I'm like, you write your statute. You create this yourself. The legislator funds you, again, help us here. So and that's another gripe. Again, that would be huge if we could cover all pre-K, whether they're regular or whether they're SPED, because many of those are inclusion-based. So it just makes too much sense for Alabama to do it. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud?
I'm glad you're saying that, because last year I know one of the things that, everybody's like trying to fix education up in Montgomery. It's like, if you want to fix education, talk to people in education. And that was one of the things that in a ASB meeting, it's like, look, include pre-K. If you want to include
Absolutely.
what's going on, or improve what's
Well, they think they are, and that they're, OSR continues to get a tremendous amount of funding year over year. But they're not including the SPED kids in that. And so that's the difference here, is that this is from the State Department specifically for special needs pre-K students. Anyway.
So the preschool includes SPED.
This one is only SPED.
That was only SPED.
Correct. I probably need to do SPED preschool, SPED state preschool to verify that. Good question, though.
Splitting hairs, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All righty. Gifted, we saw a increase from 135 to 171. Homer's been lobbying up in Montgomery. We saw the technology coordinator go from 61 to 85. I have to make some adjustments this year. I'm just kidding. And then, like I said before, we had a one-time state warrant of over $33 million that we don't have to pay back. These are the good kind. This is not the ones where I have to use capital outlay dollars to pay back over a 30-year period.
So what is that based on?
So they based it on a number of factors. Majority was ADM. So they applied the size of the school system into the formula of how they divided out I think it was a $1 billion bond.
Go back to the ADM, that number should increase.
This is one time.
One time.
Yep, this is a one-time bond offering. So if they do another one, it should increase. But again, these things, the last time they did one of these was in 07. And so it's just kind of hit or miss. All right, let's roll into federal revenue. So IDA, Individuals with Disability Act, we saw pretty much flat year over year there with the 26. We saw the the vocational, this is the Perkins Federal CareerTech funding. We saw that pretty much flat. Title I, Part A, we saw that pretty much flat. Again, this is a discussion for another day as well, but one of the reasons is because the state allowed us to use our 2019 free and reduced numbers. And I'm going to talk about this in another slide, is that everybody's getting free lunch right now. Yes, they allowed us to use that, but what's going to happen this year? When you're providing everybody a free lunch, it's very hard to provide an incentive for parents to fill out their free and reduced paperwork, because they're like, why would I want to do that when I can get a free lunch anyway, because of the seamless summer feeding program is providing it. What they're not realizing is that is going to have a very, very detrimental impact on our Title I funding. Very, 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 and I don't know how to fully address that. So, all right, like I said, that's probably a discussion for another day as we continue to get through this school year, and that may be something I bring at the end of one of my monthly ones, and we can kind of dive into that some more. Title I, N&D there, we saw that decline a little bit. Title II, we saw a $95,000 increase. Title II, we fund 8 class size reduction units, and the majority of that goes to professional development throughout the county. Title III, this is another good one. I love it when I can see the ESL on the federal and on the state side increasing. We saw an increase of $118,000. Now, we can't fund a ESL teacher using federal funds. I don't know why, it's just one of their rules. But what we can do is do an interpreter or a bilingual para or those type things and cover that federally. Title IV, student support and academic enrichment, we saw about an $18,000 decrease there. Title IV has kind of been an interesting, that just came up in a couple years ago. Last year we used a lot of the Title IV funding to fund safety equipment for the science labs throughout the county. Again, it doesn't have to be used on only Title schools. We have the ability to use it for everybody. So what we're doing this year, and there are certain percentages that you have to follow. There's a percentage around technology, safety activities, well-rounded education. Mr. Sampson and Ashley work and do a great job on that. This year, we're looking at purchasing a lot of PE equipment for elementary and middle school kids. Again, title, non-title, everybody gets kind of a refresh of a good amount of PE equipment. So this funding source is good to kind of handle some of those miscellaneous items, whether it be science labs or PE or those type things. Esther. So I'm going to talk about this one, but this one is related to the ARP that was on the agenda before we got started, and this was some remnants of Esther 1 and 2, and I've got a slide about that as well. Going into USDA, so typically we see our free and reduced USDA reimbursements about half. We typically see about $8 million, and we typically see about $8 million of typical revenue from just paying for your lunches, if that makes sense. So that's why we're seeing this increase from 8 to 14, is because we currently have the seamless summer feeding program that's providing a lunch for every single student throughout the county. It's good. I think it's a great program. I don't know how it works out with the Title I, and this since Title I is based on your free and reduced application. So I'm trying to get some clarification from the State Department, and they kind of ignore me, and they run away from me and Ashley when we ask hard questions. So, yeah. Never respond in writing to anything, they know us so well. Department of Defense, that funds about half the salary of our ROTC teachers throughout the county. And then we have a couple of federal grants regarding job transition coaches for special ed kids and other things that would fall under federal revenue. All right, drilling down into special education. So I made this comment that, a lot of people think that federal funding is covering all of our SPED kids, all of the needs, and that is a complete false statement. So you can see 80% of our expenses to cover our 4,300 kids, or almost 4,400 kids, is coming from foundation, and it's coming from local. And so we're only getting $8 million in federal funding to address that, but we have to follow all of the federal regulations to make that happen. We have about 612 in special ed staff, going from teachers to paras and psychometrists and all of the above. Now, if you've been on the board for a while, you know that I've been showing this for probably like 6-7 years in a row, showing our SPED count numbers. And for a while, I was like, guys, whoa, because it was just going straight up, and it was very concerning. Again, this is a good thing. Now, I want to preface, a lot of this is from the Gulf Shore split, and some of this is from the coronavirus, but I also want to give credit where credit's due, in that Ms. Zena, Ms. Carter have done a tremendous job training, really harping on the RTI process, making sure that we correctly identify kids. We're not over-identifying kids, because my big thing, because we get such a small amount of federal funds, I want to make sure these funds are used for the kids that really need it. And to do that, we have to make sure we correctly identify that. I knew that this was not sustainable. It just wasn't. And so this is the chart I showed last year, and this is our SPED count, and this is our funding. And I was, you never want to see it cross like this, but this is very good because we're starting to close that gap. That's a good question. So we were able to apply the expenses in Gulf Shores and pass that maintenance of effort to them for them to meet in order to get their federal aid. It did not penalize us. So what we were spending, they had to match that in order to get their federal funds. Having a school system's fun, yeah. All righty. Let's talk about ESSER. Talk about ESSER 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, and CRF and gear, and how everything will just run together into, again, I'm very appreciative of these funds. These funds came at a time, and we've been able to use this to do a lot of programs for Baldwin County. With anything on the federal level, it comes with a lot of work, and it comes with a lot of red tape. Again, a lot of kudos to Renee, a lot of kudos to Ashley for helping so much in our navigating through, as you saw on the board agenda, are massive applications. And the state will spend 6 months to develop the application, and then they'll be like, you got 2 weeks to do this. Go now. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. So a recapping of everything since the beginning of the CARES. So ESSER 1, we got $4.9 million. That was all spent in fiscal year 20 and 21. So my big thing was, let's spend it, let's get it closed out, and let's go to the next one, because if we keep all these things open and they can roll over from year to year, it is going to be a very, very confusing place to navigate through. So that has been our goal. SR1, this is coronavirus relief funds. That was ESSER funds that went to the state. The state decided we'd like to give some of our funds to school systems, but they can only use it for health reasons, and they can only use it for technology device purposes. So we use this to fill up our warehouse with PPE and cleaning supplies, and also cover some of the salaries of our existing nurses. That has all been spent in FY20 and 21. We were able to use the CRF from devices to refresh Chromebooks, which is great because we were going to need to refresh anyway. So that worked out well. That's been completely spent in FY20 and 21. We also had SR1 gears, and that was basically the governor's pot of money that she could allocate, and she had specific purposes that gears could be used for. And one of them was Wi-Fi on the buses, and we were like, oh, I'm not sure how that's going to work. But what she did do is that it can do summer programs, and we knew that we had the Summer Literacy Act program and the law that was requiring students that tested under a certain level would have to come to summer school. There really wasn't any other funding to cover it, and so we're like, this is actually working out perfectly. So we used $1.4 million to cover the Literacy Act summer school program for this past summer. We had it in like 14 elementary schools, 16, okay, I was close. We still have some left over, so about $415,000 is carrying over to this fiscal year. We're going to reapply it to summer school for this year as well and close that out. SR2, the board approved this application, I think, in May. There is a variety of a lot of different things in there, and I would encourage if anybody would like the details of that, it's in the May board agenda, the actual application that we sent to the state that lists out the description and the rationale and the reasoning for every single cent of the $20 million. We spent $7.5 million so far this summer. Renee's been on it. She's been spending it. Man, I wasn't worried. We still have about $12 million that's going to carry over until this next fiscal year. SR3, ARP. This is what was just approved before this meeting. Now, it's in kind of three different categories. You have the SR3 ARP, and it was around $45 million. You had part of the ARP, too, is that they gave every state department of education 10% of the allocation that they include as a reserve. And so we had a state reserve allocation of around $5 million. And then we had an ARP Homeless application that was around $50,000. And Ashley loves the ARP Homeless. The homeless is crazy. It is insane. Again, we're having to use this to walk around in Walmart and buy things for people who claim to be homeless. I mean, people don't realize what we have to do for these type of things, whether it be your clothes or your shoes or your medicine. Look, it's a good thing. I just hate that it's on the school system in order to manage all of that. I wish if they were to do an ARP Homeless, give it to one of the many organizations throughout the county and through the state that are set up to address these type situations. But it flows to us. So on the ARP, so the $50 million has to be spent by September 30th of 2024. Do you know? So SR2 covered a lot of things. It covered everything from professional development to extra work agreements to software. We can, and we did allocate some of that for summer reading because I'm going to roll this over from gears to cover summer reading, and a big chunk of SR2 is going to go to fill the gap because it's going to cost us when we do transportation and some of the other things and have nurses and everything else there. I mean, it's going to, depending on the number of sites that we offer and depending on the number of kids that have to do it. Yes. We have tutoring under SR2. Lord, what did I miss? What's another big thing?
That was most of SR2. SR3 has a set aside amount too that's required for summer programs. So it will continue the summer programs. It includes learning loss and then intermediate support, which is also SR2, which is support after school tutoring.
So because of the ESSERs, we can fully fund summer school until 2024. And we've built that into all the applications to address that. A big thing in ARP is that we're covering the equipment costs at the CareerTech High School. So that's huge. So another big thing in ARP, in that I think we have around $15 million of this to cover the big capital equipment that we're going to have to purchase for the CareerTech High School. So I was kind of worried about that for a while, and so we could follow the same federal provisions in ARP, and Perkins allows us to buy capitalized equipment, and so therefore it's allowable under ARP. And so we're able to utilize this money to help fully equip the CareerTech High School. So that's huge. And we have a lot of textbooks. Yes.
That's our most expensive years, so we were able to contemplate and get everything our students need.
We have a lot of our instructional software. We decided, give us a 4-year, give us a 3-year license on that. So you have to be very careful because this is one-time funding. And so you have to make sure you use it appropriately. So when you get into FY25 and utilize this in the most fiscally responsible manner, addressing what we need, but also to not put us in a bad spot when all of this one-time funding rolls off after September of 2024. So another thing in SR2 is that we're using it it can if there's a health component to it. So we're using some SR2 funds to replace every single water fountain in the entire county with a bottle filler. And we're also using it to put the specialized filters in every single HVAC unit in every single school throughout the county. I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I definitely wanted to mention and bring up. So, yes, if you can say it's being used for a sanitation type purpose. All right, child C&P. Again, a lot of people don't realize, but we are such a massive organization, and we serve the equivalent of over 435,000 meals per month. I mean, we're a massive restaurant, massive. One time I had some fun facts, and I just ran out of time this year, but how many apples do we buy and how much bread do we buy? I mean, it's staggering just to facilitate that. It was to me. I thought it was interesting. It may have been. So typically, like I said before, we see the split. We see the estimated sales from non-free and reduced kids make up about 8 million. We see USDA about 8 million because it makes sense because we're typically around 47% free and reduced. The estimated sales is really if you want anything a la carte over and above your regular meal, you still have to pay for it, and that's kind of an estimate here. Another one of the federal, I love these federal laws, that it says you can use USDA C&P to cover the salaries, but you can't use it to cover the benefits. Go figure. So we have to transfer right under $5 million to cover the benefit expense for all of our C&P employees throughout the county. So that's what that is. We can apply for state rebates. Total revenue of around $20 million.
How does that relate to the cost? What's the cost?
So the good news is that the cost, and Lord, I'm going to butcher this off the top of my head, but we're able to do it for, I think, God, I hate to say this without having it directly, but we're able to do it, probably with a 40 to 50 cents margin based on what the reimbursement is, and that can go towards addressing the salaries. And how we look at that is that I look at the meals served per hour, and we make sure and we align that based on the staff that's in the cafeteria to make sure that we can have the staff in there and have it equitable throughout the county. So I can get that. I don't have a slide and don't have that exactly off the top of my head to show what the cost and what the revenue is. But I did an Excel thing for Aaron. It changes colors and everything, and they update it every month. And it shows the food costs and all that kind of stuff. So I can definitely pull that. Okay, going into local revenue, one of the big aspects for local revenue is that our countywide taxes are to be split by Gulf Shores, and it's to be split by ADM. And so we've seen around that. I think when we first split, Gulf Shores was around 6.3. They're around 6.8 now based on that ADM. I think they had around 1,800 kids, 1,900 to 1,900 kids to start off with. But out of our total countywide of 31,711 students, Baldwin County services 93% of those, and so that's how that's divided up. So with that in mind, our Nonmills countywide tax has to be split based on that percentage. And so based on the abstract from the county revenue collector, can't talk, $50 million with about 43% of that, or $46 million coming to Baldwin County, about 3.4 coming to Gulf Shores. The district tax is done different, and so it takes the valuation based within the lines in that district. And so it's not based on your ADM. And so that is based on the valuations inside the city limits of Gulf Shores. And this is the valuation in Baldwin County of everybody else outside of a tiny little sliver in the very, very north part of Little River. Same thing with our state, with our 4012-4 county commission levied sales tax amount. So we've got a regular 1 cent. And again, that was done in 2 intervals. I think one was done in 88 and one was done in 92. And everybody knows about the 1 cent penny sales tax. That is divided up. So out of the 2% here, we're estimating countywide to bring in about 90. And again, I'm being conservative on both of these numbers, estimating about $96 million. Out of that, 90 goes to Baldwin County, and about 6.5 goes to Gulf Shores. Looking at that year over year, so looking at ad valorem, including probate, including the car tags and boat tags and all of that, again, property values continue to just be on fire. If you've gotten your assessment in the mail, you probably are like, oh wow, so is the assessed value. And so that's what I'm kind of using to model what I think we're going to collect for that fiscal year. I also try to factor in a contingency factor that as assessed values continue to increase, we know that more people are going to challenge it. They're going to say, no, I want to go to the Board of Appeals and challenge the valuation because I think it's overstated. And so you have to make sure you factor in the contingency there, and that's one of the things I always make sure that I do. That being said, even with the contingency, that's an 8% increase in ad valorem year over year. Business privilege tax really stays flat. It really doesn't move that much, and we don't get that allocation until September, so it's kind of hard to budget on that. Oh, thank you. What is in this? It's just water, yeah. Yeah, that's right, it's getting close. It's not special juice. It's not as good as not special juice. Woo! Woo! Starting to sweat. I'm gonna get in so much trouble. All right, countywide use tax. So again, I'm trying to be conservative here. Everybody knows sales tax can be very volatile. We also have seen that sales tax has been on fire this year, so I'm trying to account for that, but also give us a stable figure from which to budget on, knowing that storms and pandemics and asteroids and zombie apocalypse, I mean, you name it. I mean, anything can come and impact sales tax. So I'm not ruling off anything, you know. I saw there's like a solar flare, solar tsunami that was coming to the earth, and I was like, oh, Lord. But that's still a 6% increase. Sorry. Yeah, that's not covered under insurance either. Woo! 6% increase in sales tax, that's something that I'll monitor and we'll amend and we'll adjust. I would much rather underestimate sales tax than overestimate. I love when I can say, board, sales tax is on fire, we have extra money. That extra money means we can do this extra program, or we can bump up this extra project on our pay-as-you-go. I would hate to be like, board, we have a problem. I thought we were going to receive this and we actually received this. So that's why I always try to stay conservative, especially with sales tax. Other county revenue, majority of this is alcohol tax. So I want to thank the people in this room that have contributed to the increase in our alcohol tax and your support of the school system. So Hope was quick to raise her hand. I gotcha. So, all right, bank interest. So unfortunately, this is sad, and this is just because the feds have dropped rates to 0. And any type of investment, whether it be a CD, they're like, we'll give you like like 2 basis points. There was a time in the very near future, like 2 years ago, we were receiving over $1 million in interest. And a lot of that was because we were taking the money in the PreK program, utilizing that to maximize our interest expense, and then rolling that back into the program. Unfortunately, I'm estimating $12,000 of revenue for this year. I do know that's going to go up, but again, that's anybody's call on how that's really a federal, national level type thing that dictates the interest rates that you can get at a bank. And we don't really have, not that I would do it, but we have a very, very narrow scope in what we can invest in. So it's pretty much, it has to be liquid, and it's pretty much like a CD, and those are paying very, very little. Other revenue, we get about $1 million in Medicaid reimbursements. We also have about $1.2 million in our after-school tuition program that's included here. Total local revenue, and again, this is general fund, so it doesn't include the half-cent sales tax that's in special revenue, and also the local revenue that the schools raise, whether that be public through fees or whether that be non-public through clubs. It's included in special revenue, so it's not included in this general fund slide, but out of the 156, again, 42 of that is earmarked, and so that brings us to $113 million available for local use, representing about a $5 million increase. Ad valorem, like I said before, this shows the breakdown between property taxes and probate taxes, still bringing us to that 8% increase. 2 years from now, this will be reflected on our 10 mil match. The value of that divided by 10, you guys get the idea, we'll roll into our 10 mil match calculation. Quickly, the 3 mil tax districts. Nice revenue coming in. Everybody knows that Fairhope is currently levied. Fairhope and Spanish Fort levied at the same time in 2019. And so I feel like even in the midst of the coronavirus and the challenges, I feel like it was a very successful year for both of the committees in Fairhope and Spanish Fort. If you look at what we're projecting the Fairhope 3 mil to bring in, including probate, is right under $2.5 million. That's about a $500,000 increase from what they received this past fiscal year. Everybody knows that there's a committee that meets, and they lay out the priorities and the budget based on a collaborative effort with the principals. We review it just to make sure there's no duplication of effort, especially with the federal ESSER funds and everything that was coming through, just to make sure, hey, let's we're going to spend that in ESSER, let's reappropriate it somewhere else. Spanish Fort, we're estimating an increase of right under $900,000. That's about a $100,000 increase of where we were the previous year with Spanish Fort. They had the same committee. In fact, Miss April's on the committee and she's here today. Woo! I think she's our only special guest. You know what? I forgot to do this. I'm going to kick myself in the face. And I had it on my first slide. Yeah, Sarah can do it. Yeah. What's that? Okay, that's good. I need that. And that my 2 accounting supervisors are here, Patsy and Lisa, and they do an outstanding job. And I could not accomplish a budget to the size of this system without their help. And so, again, I want to kick myself in the face for not acknowledging that at the very beginning, but I want to acknowledge it now because I couldn't do it without them. They're absolutely critical to the success of the business and finance department. Thank you guys for coming here. And if I get really, really hard questions, I know I can go in and ask them real fast. So. All right. Woo. So what I should have done is I should have had Anthony dress up as Morpheus and do a live action of this meme. Have the same hairdo, and it would have been good. Next year. Okay, yes, sir. I've got debt service slides. You want me to wait till we get there, or? Okay. Halfway done. Everybody doing okay? Anybody need a break? Anybody need a stretch? It's hot in here. Woo! So we're saving money on energy. All right. Okay, so the first half of the presentation was revenue. Let's talk about expenses. So one of the things that kind of skews this is capital outlay and debt. Okay, you can kind of see that this is covering 34% of our total expenditures throughout the entire system. So what I like to do is show a more accurate picture, and if we remove these, this is more of what you typically see in school systems throughout Alabama. The reason we are here is because we're also one of the fastest growing school systems in Alabama, and we got to address our facilities, and that is associated with capital outlay and unfortunately debt. To our benefit, most of our debt is short term, so 81%. So let's talk about people. So based on our total employees, and again, sometimes this is like nailing Jell-O to a wall. I'm like, I got it, and Tiffany goes and puts 30 more people on the board agenda, and I'm like, dang it, I didn't have it. So this is an ever-revolving thing, as you can see, based on needs and those type things. But you can see this is pretty close. So you can see I broke it down into our three main categories: state, federal, and local. The state foundation program, we all know where this is coming from. The nurse program, I mentioned the 19. The transportation on the operational basis, that's covering the 316 positions. The reading initiative funding that I showed that didn't change covered 17. Unfortunately, because of the 2% raise, we may have to move one of the 17 to local and do that because I thought the state was going to count for that, but that's what I get for thinking that. I mentioned that OCE is the only item in the foundation program where we have the flexibility to use that funding as we see fit, and I said we use that 100% on classified support units. 536 positions, everything from your bookkeeper to your secretary to your registrars to your custodians to central office position. As many people as I can fit in there, I try to do that. We saw the increase in OCE, and I mentioned that was $800 per teaching unit, and that was reflecting the 2% too. So at least the state took into account that. Other is what I mentioned. It's pre-K, it's at risk, it's state ESL, it's those type positions that we have about 41 positions there. Going into federal, we have about 104 coming out of federally funding IDA. We have about 53 in the title programs. This is going to change because we still have to assign the class size reductions coming out of Title II, but we need to make sure we have an accurate reflection of everybody's class sizes because we're getting monitored, and that's one of the things you have to have proof before you assign those out. I mentioned CMP, 227, and these are our 6 ROTC instructors. Local funds, 611 locally funded positions, and this is one of the big things. I know, Mr. Johnson, you've asked that. And if you look at this slide last year, you can see this was over 800. And so I told you that because of kind of the way we structured things with the virtual school being a call center, because of the stabilization funds, because we did see an increase in foundation program, we did see an increase in some of the other miscellaneous, whether it be nurses, whether it be the ESL, preschool, in that we're able to move our locally funded down to a much more manageable position of 611. We've got 25 coming out of the 3 mil, and that's the other locally funded. So let's drill down into the 611. Out of the 611, we have 206 that are teachers. I mentioned earlier that we cover 22 counselors over and above what we earn in the foundation program. That's where they are. Principals, we have 1, and I'm pretty sure that's the alternative school. They're not included in the foundation allocation for whatever reason. So we make sure that we cover Don because he's doing a good job. I mentioned earlier that we have 28 assistant principals over and above what we earn in the foundation program. Other certified employees is a lot of people in this building. It's a lot of your instructional group. It's a lot of people that would kind of be more like on the instructional support side. And that's covering your 25 here. So that's your certified, and so getting into your classified support, we still have about 87 paras. I've broken it up into clerical and technical just to make this fit on one slide. Again, I can always drill down if anybody wants to know the specifics. And in the supplemental pages in the back of this, we list every single school and every single funding source for every single employee. So, but you guys already know this because I know you guys have read this so many years. So, Troy, so looking at clericals, looking at clericals, we have our bookkeepers, our registrars, our secretaries. We fund about 42. And again, that's over and above what we're able to do in the OCE funding. Technical, I'm rolling in our nurses, our social workers, our IT technicians. That's 71 locally funded positions, over and above what we can cover with OCE. Same thing with maintenance, whether that be some additional custodians, mechanics, HVAC repair, painters, etc. About 81 locally funded positions there. We fund 37 positions. I mentioned to everybody that the operation does not fund the full operations of the school system, that we're having to cover some locally. There is what I was talking about. Other classified administrative positions would be like some of my staff, myself, Mr. Kaufman, some of those type positions. Brings us to 610,000. That brings us to 42,000. You probably remember, and I got a slide to show this. Mr. Tyler's looking tired. I'm sorry. So last year, this was like $55 million, okay? Extracurricular supplements, that goes to, and I have a good slide that I'm going to update that. But that is, we provide band and athletic supplements and choir supplements. And also all the coaching supplements are kind of included in this figure.
Why is 610 different from the 636 on the slide before?
Oh, 3 mil. So the 3 mil people, really that's the decision of the committee. And so the board can't make a call on that without the committee approving that. That's why I didn't put it in to that slide, because we approve it, yes, but all the control is at the local level. Yes, sir. Good question. So last year I showed this slide, and this had our salaries and this had our benefits. And I said a lot of this was because of the chaos of last year with 8,000 kids moving into the virtual school. I believe at the time we were scheduled to hire over 130 positions of all levels to cover that. Yeah, in like a month. I mean, it was chaos. But we also decided that it wasn't fair to the brick and mortar schools if you just moved teachers over. So we hired over and above and kept everybody the same. Again, that brought us up here to $55 million. And I told y'all that, again, I have a plan. One time I said, just trust me, and everybody in the room went insane in a very negative way. But, hope you guys know that I said, just trust me, I have a plan to address this. And I hope this proves to you guys that this year we're back on a much more sustainable path. And I have one more chart to illustrate that as well. Of course I do. So the blue line is personnel cost, and the red line was our 1% sales tax. So the one thing, and I think I mentioned that when I was looking at last year, I was like, when you start to see that gap increase, it starts to become unsustainable. And you really have to be proactive to address those type of things. Or you get into a situation that we never want to go through again in 2008 and 2009 and 2010 when the board had to RIF over 800 employees, and it was devastating to every aspect of Baldwin County. And so I never want to see that happen as long as I'm in this role. And so I'm always going to be cognizant of making sure that we're sustainable on these levels. This is beautiful. We've fully covered the gap. So, and you probably saw that we're projecting the 1% sales tax to be at 45, and then our locally funded units is right there at it, guys. This is great. This is awesome. This is exactly kind of what I was planning. I was a little bit nervous. It's like, I got a plan. I think it's going to work, but I was a little bit nervous last year. And so Tiffany's done a tremendous job managing that. Hope, Marty, everybody. It's just the challenges, Sarah, navigating through everything on the personnel side. I mean, it was definitely a unique year. Now, this is a new slide. I thought this would be interesting to everybody. So, so again, we never looked about, if you take our certified employees, how many have their bachelor's and how many have their master's? How many have their 6-year admin? How many have their doctorate? So if we look at here, out of all of our certified employees, I did an awesome pivot table on this. This was fun. We had 877 certified employees with their masters, but with their bachelors, but look at masters. Over 1,400 employees, 106 teens certified with their admin certificate, and 36 with their PhDs. That equates to 58% of our certified employees have a master's degree. We got some well-educated teachers in Baldwin County, and I think that's awesome. Woo! So here's another interesting slide, and this is a new one too. So I pulled a massive thing into Excel and started playing with it. But have we ever looking at teachers, how does that represent by their years of experience? Again, that's something that I've never done, but I thought it'd be really interesting to look at. And I think this tells a very interesting story in Baldwin County. Yeah. I couldn't continue the chart to make it fit on the screen for Hope Zena. Yeah. Hope Zena's over here. I can, but it starts to get really small. Yeah, I know this is a big screen. But what I thought is interesting is that we've heard of so many school systems, and we've heard of the issues of having a hard time recruiting students in the colleges to go into the education field, having a very hard time recruiting those kids from colleges to come there. And a lot of school systems, you're seeing the opposite. You're seeing the largest number being some of your older teachers, and they're retiring, and they're really, really struggling bringing in the new teachers. So Baldwin County has flipped that, and I think that's very, very encouraging. And if you look at this, our highest graph is brand new teachers. Not only are they brand new teachers, but these are brand new, very well-educated teachers. So, I think that, with the amount of money we spend on PD and our plans with the ESSER funds, we're going to be able to train these teachers to be in Baldwin County for a long time. And this is going to pay a huge dividend. Now, again, I'm not discounting anybody else, but it is kind of interesting where you can kind of see some dips. And again, of course, after 10 years and after the vested period, you'll see a dip, but you also see it rise up. And so overall, majority of our teachers are under 10 years of experience. So that's something that I don't think has ever been shown or demonstrated in this manner. I thought was very interesting. And I think Baldwin County is in a much, much better position than so many other school systems. It's because we have very competitive pay. It's a very good place to live. We have great schools, and it's a great place to raise a family. So if you're coming out of college and you want to get an education, you want to raise your family, Baldwin County is one of the best in the state, and we're seeing that in the numbers here. Employer benefit cost. Quickly, just the benefits. Again, the total benefit cost on top of salaries countywide is around $70 million for Baldwin County, and that consists of PHIP. So every single employee, whether they're a bus driver or they're the superintendent, the board pays $9,600 for their health care for everybody. So I was trying to get my dad to drive a bus. I was like, good health care, $9,600, pick up a bus route, you're retiring. But retirement, again, this is something that I've talked about multiple years here. There's two tiers. And unfortunately, these two tiers are very unfortunate. And I think everybody already knows. But tier one is everybody that was hired before January of 2013, and the biggest benefit is that after 25 years as a tier one employee, you can retire. You can use all your sick leave. I think that may have gotten adjusted in this legislative session. A tier two teacher does not have that benefit, and I think that's a big issue in the recruiting, like I mentioned before, and all of those implications. And a lot of new teachers don't realize that. They see an older teacher and they see him hit 25 years and retire, and they go to their party, and that's going to be me. And they don't realize that you can't retire until you hit 62 as a tier 2 employee and start receiving that. So, did you fall asleep, Michelle? I'm just kidding with you. Yeah. I'm just kidding with you. Again, I'm gonna get in trouble. Chris Elliott? Chris! All right, so real world example here. You got a brand new teacher with a master's degree, starting salary of right over $50,000. Benefit cost would be around $19,000, bring us to a total cost of right under $70,000 per employee. That does not include sub or supplies, but that kind of gives you an idea of, a lot of times, this is kind of the hidden cost that nobody talks about, but it's substantial. Debt service. All right, Mr. Stewart, I'm ready. Okay. Do you want me to go through it and see if it answers your question, or do you want to? Okay. So this is all of our debt service, bringing us to a total of $31 million here. And you can see a lot of this, up to what was approved in the last board meeting, was all refinancing. So we had a big bond in 05 and we had a huge bond in 07. And so the 2012 here was refinancing the 2005, and all of these was trying to refinance at different times the 07. And the 2020, during the coronavirus, interest rates went so low. That's when we did a refinancing, and it's actually taxable interest because it was so low that tax exempt didn't exist during that time period. And so the interesting thing in this is that we've been able to watch the market and watch some moves that have probably never occurred in a 50, 100-year period and take advantage of it to slowly start reducing our interest expense on bonds that were taken out in the 2000s. I mentioned the total pooled state warrant here. There's the principal and there's the interest. This is the new one. This is for this next fiscal year, and I'm going to show you that it's going to change. This fiscal year is a little bit different, and then we're going to get back on a regular rotation because we have to pay our bondholders in December, and I know they're paid in January and they're paid in June, and so it commingles different fiscal years, and so when you have a new bond issue, it's not the same until you can get on a better rotation. We have some local school debt that's included on this as well, bringing us to about $22 million in principals and $8 million of interest. This is what I was, and I'll go back to that last slide, but this is what I was referring to. This does not show some of our state bonds, but this shows a breakdown of all of our local bonds, when they will expire, and those type of things. And this is the new one. So like I said before, this fiscal year was $2 million. We're going to get into about a $3 million a year on principal and interest on the new CareerTech high school bond once we get into FY23. And you can see our total existing, because PayGo, again, we pay that off every 4 years. It's a great program, but it's very, very cash capital intense. And so it increases the obligations we're having to do that. In the long run, it's a great program. It's going to save us hundreds of millions of dollars in interest, but it does have a cost in the short term. Just like if you were to pay cash for your house versus taking out a 30-year mortgage. If you can do it, it's probably going to be difficult that year, but the long-term implications of that are going to pay for itself over and over and over again. This is kind of the graph that kind of shows where we are. You can see right now, again, the good thing about the PayGo program is that we can evaluate it every 4 years. We can change it. Do we need 50? Do we need 30? Do we need more? And so that's going to drive this. The PayGo program falls off, and you can see that that's the 24-25 pay period here, and that's here hitting most of our local long-term bonds. Now, you're probably wondering, what in the world is this? So there are two statewide bonds, and it's called QZAB and QSCAB, and there's a balloon payment that's due at the end of the term. The good news is that every year I put money into escrow. And so, yes, it shows a big payment here, but from a cash flow basis, it's not going to impact us because I've been making escrow payments since it started. Really, that's going to be the last of our state bonds that we have to pay off. So, I mean, that's a tremendous undertaking. We've been carrying some of these state bonds since the 90s. We kind of roll into the 26, 27, 29, and then our 2005 refinanced in 2012, partially refinanced last year. It rolls off. When we were approving the bond at the last board meeting, and we made the comment of could we pay this off early, and I said it's callable in 10 years, and I said it actually kind of aligns with paying off some of our other debt, and this is what I was referring to. And so depending on the circumstances of where we are, when the CareerTech high school bond becomes callable, which that's just the stipulation with it being a tax-exempt bond, is that you got to wait 10 years, and then you have the option to pay it off or refinance it or do a lot of those type things. We do have the option to explore paying off additional debt. So this is rolling our 07 that has been refinanced many, many times, drops down to our $3 million a year, and that's the latest CareerTech bond that goes to 41.
So
And that's 31,165,000.
Well, no, that wasn't the question, I mean, I just noticed that.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I want to know, I guess, was in that, the debt service was 29 million change.
And I may have missed that on a slide. I was trying to do these in pieces with the allocation, so I may have.
So that would include, so I know that the bond issues, I think, will be paid off in 3 or 4 years,
Correct.
right? So that would be included in the 29 million to 10. And again, I would say,
29 million. Can you show me what slide that is?
I guess where I was going with it is on the, like, capital projects, $2,929,868.77. What is included in those projects, or
1,900,000. So I do break down in capital projects too. Yeah, that I show our capitalized repair and also show the pay-go. I'll show.
actually it was, slide number 1.
Slide number 1. Okay, good question. Good question. So this is what you're referring to. What I would say is follow the debt service line, because we have some of this in the local school. The state pooled is actually coming into capital projects, and so if you follow it across, you'll see that should tie together. Does that answer your question?
So within the 29 million, right?
That is all of our locally funded bonds.
So that's not the pay you go.
It is the pay-as-you-go. Yes, sir. And that would be principal and interest. So it's the pay-as-you-go and the existing locally local bonds. Yes, sir. Correct. So, yes. So this one is the state bond. So one of the things is that the state revenue here that you get for PSCA, in the past, the state would take out a bond. And they said, if you want to participate, then you give some of your capital allocation funds to pay as collateral to that. That's what we did. That one rolls off in about 2 years, and that one's been on the books for a long, long time. That is why it's in the capital projects here, because we're having to use, again, this state revenue includes the bond and the $7 million that I referred to in a previous slide for capital outlay, and $2 million of that is collateral that we have to use to cover that. Whew, thought I messed up, Stuart. Got me nervous. Good question, though. Very good question. All right, let's fast forward. Are you counting? Well, man, I'm proud of you, Anthony. It's not that bad. I'm trying to make it fun. All right, we're getting close, guys. All right, looking at expenditures, looking at the dollar amount. This is all the funds. This is general fund. This is special revenue. This is debt service. This is capital. This is fiduciary. Rolling into everything. Looking at the year-over-year totals. Again, we know what's driving it. It's because we have a lot of capital projects that's tying into the PayGo, that's tying into the state bond, that's tying into the CareerTech bond. That's tying into cash programs. That's tying into a lot of that. We know up here that instructional services, a big driver of these two categories is Esther. We know that that's going to be spent from now until 2024, and everything else kind of falls along with what we would typically see in a growing school system. So this is just the percentage of how that breaks out. Again, it always kind of skews it because we're so aggressive on our school building plan. I don't want anybody to think that we're shorting instructional. That's not true. It's just when you chart it as a percentage of the whole, it shows up this way because of how aggressive we are here. Looking at the general fund, again, this is the operating fund. This gives a more of a true picture because it takes out those federal funds and some of the one-time funds that are in the debt service. And that's why it's so good to give the update on the general fund year over year. So this is more what we were thinking. Instructional services. Again, this reduction is because we were able to consolidate the virtual school positions. It's not a cut of teacher units or anything like that. It's because we were able to make that consolidation over. Instructional service support, increase in operations and maintenance. We're seeing that increase. That's pretty standard. We live in a humid area, and again, making sure that we allocate the correct amount for maintenance. In this category, it's mostly salaries and benefits in the general fund. It's capital projects fund, which I'll go over, shows all the projects we're going to do. General and administrative services. And I'm going to talk about this too, and I'm going to drill in, but one of the big things is not because we're just loading up central office, that's what everybody loves to say, it's because our server cost falls under general admin, and we're doing a substantial redo, upgrade of our servers throughout Baldwin County. Now, again, I hate that the state makes me categorize it in this nature because I feel like it's kind of misleading because we're a one-to-one district. I think having servers is key to your instructional services. I think it should be up here, but it is what it is. Again, most school systems don't do one-to-one like we do. But looking at it on the general fund, that's much more what you would expect. 82% on, and again, taking out your capital, taking out your debt service, again, taking out your federal funds, these type of things, 82 instructional support, and you can see operations and maintenance, transportation, general admin, which we're typically under 3%, but Homer just had to update the servers and mess up my percentages. So, yeah. The category definitions, and again, I don't make these up. We have a 500-page manual that the State Department says everybody has to fall in one of these categories, and this is how they categorize it. And when I show you all the different categories, hopefully this will make sense. Personnel services, obviously that's salaries and benefits. It can include your extra work agreements and subs. Purchase services, I don't really like how the state lumps so much into purchase services. It really kind of bothers me, and it makes it very difficult to break it out to a certain level. But the state definition for purchase services is that it includes the cost of services, which by nature can be performed by a person or firm with specialized skills or knowledge, services performed by persons other than school employees to operate, repair, maintenance, property owned or used by the school system. Basically what that is that's professional development, that's other professional services, whether that be board expenses at the board level, auditing, legal expenses, property services, some of our building repairs, insurance, garbage, communications, our telephone, our internet, our postage. All of our utility is classified as purchase services. Electricity, water, gas, any of our travel, whether that's in county, out of state, et cetera, is falling under purchase services. Athletic officials, transportation, other providers, all these type of things. Materials and supplies here are items that are consumed, worn out, and deteriorated through use. Again, that's majority your books. It's also your custodial and maintenance supplies, paper towels, those type of things. Vehicle supplies, whether it be fuel, oil, tires. Food supplies is considered under this category. Office supplies, non-instructional supplies, non-capitalized equipment, and then capitalized equipment are those big items that are basically acquiring to a fixed asset, and a fixed asset is either a land or existing building, an improvement, or a big item that exceeds $5,000. Debt service, principal, and interest. So looking at the different categories, I wanted to go through the instructional support, maintenance, auxiliary, admin, and other, and show you of those categories, how are we spending those funds? And so if we take the instructional services, now instructional services is anybody that's dealing directly with the interaction between the teacher and students. Those are your teachers in the classroom. Instructional support would be services and activities providing supervision or technical logistical support to facilitate or enhance instruction. Your principals, your AP, your counselors, those type admin would fall into instructional support. You can see 93% is on personnel. That's what you would expect. 6% is going on textbooks and instructional software, and 1% is PD. Operation and maintenance. So you can see when we look at this category, you can see 38% is personnel. And again, I want to just say that this includes the general fund and the half-cent, because the half-cent is earmarked for operation, for maintenance and repair purposes. I use the half-cent to pay our utility cost. I mean, that's just the easiest way to do it, to fall within the earmark provisions there. If we look at that, 38% of that is personnel, 37% of that is utilities and insurance, 6% is the $2 million that the board funds for the SRO program year over year. 13% is maintenance repair contracts that cover a wide range of all kind of maintenance issues that we see in our existing facilities. And then 6% is janitorial and maintenance supplies, paper towels, toilet paper, cleaning materials, all those type things. Transportation, if you look at transportation, 70% of that is coming from the personnel. Purchase services, really what purchase services for the most part is drug testing, and it's the annual cost of the bus tracking software. 11% of that is tied into our fuel costs and our parts costs and supplies, and then 16% is purchasing actual buses. Child nutrition program, 52% is personnel, 38% is purchase food, 2% is purchase services, mostly travel. Cafeteria managers make deposits to the bank every day, and so that eats up a big chunk. 8% is supplies and needs in the kitchen. General admin, this is what I was referring to earlier. So of the general admin expense here of $12.4 million, which we did see it increase, 59% of that is personnel, 22% of that is Homer and all of his servers. Nobody understands this. They just think we're overloaded central office. Again, thanks to Ms. Young, we've been able to reduce our legal fees. Woo! Hand clap. Purchase services here covers a lot of different things, whether that be travel, whether that be the courier expense. In my budget, I cover all the stuff that nobody wants to cover, such as like the copier leases and all that other stuff that's rolling into that. And 5% is directly related to the business and finance and the HR software programs, whether that be Cronus, NextGen, Frontline, and Workforce Ready component inside Cronus. Woo, we're getting there. Other expenditures on the general fund, again, is made up of activities and programs that are normally considered kind of outside the typical K-12 program. So again, of that, 63% of other expenditures is directly related to PreK. Majority of that is salaries, and 37% is our after-school program. This is what I was referring to earlier. So when we use the $7 million, and it's close to $8 million, back out the $2 million on the state pooled bond, these are some of the upgrades that we're using some of our dollars to address. These were capital projects that we had in FY21 that we weren't able to get to. So these are all projects that are going to be rolling over into this next fiscal year. So you can see a good amount of boiler replacements, chiller replacements, just regular maintenance on the door, maintenance on the generators, HVAC replacements. And then one of the big initiatives that me and Mr. Tyler and Frank have really been trying to do is upgrade our playgrounds to be ADA compliant throughout the county. And you can see, I've learned that nothing makes the principal happier than when you're like, you get a new playground, and they like start crying. And I'm like, wow, nothing makes them happier than saying you're going to get a playground. But you can see, these are not cheap. These are running about $250,000 a pop. But again, it's a good investment. It's going to last for a long time, and it's going to be able to provide the playground for all students, regardless of what their handicap needs may be. And so this is something that this has been a long time coming. So, again, encourage everybody to go around and look. this year. Look at the upgrades as we hit these schools. We did about, how many schools did we do previously that were complete on playgrounds? 15 different playgrounds, ADA compliant. So we have been spending millions of dollars on playgrounds, but it's an initiative that I'm proud of, and it's much needed. Some re-roofing at Fairhope High School, that's bringing us to about $3.4 million of some carryover projects. Looking at new projects for this year, we're looking at replacing some gym bleachers, looking at the boilers, looking at fire alarms, looking at doing some substantial floor replacements. Again, it looks, when Frank's team goes in and replaces the floor, it looks awesome. It's kind of the fancy laminate. I don't know what you call it. Maybe that's not it. Luxury vinyl. That luxury looks good. Again, we're especially with hurricanes and when our generators go down, it means we lose everything in the cafeteria. So we want to make sure that we invest in generators so we can make sure we aren't dealing with situations where we lose a tremendous amount of food, especially when we're having to change the menus for this year because we're having trouble getting a lot of our food items to be delivered. In fact, you probably saw that Crispitos, rest in peace, because there's a shortage. It's very tragic. Oh, everyone shed a tear. Still have square pizza though. The minute that goes away, I'm gonna be like, y'all, we're in trouble. HVAC upgrades. Again, HVACs can vary. It's very, many times we can see a big $500,000 upgrade there. So what I do here is that the projects we can identify, we do that. But I also like to make sure that Frank has some available funds throughout the year. If something goes wrong or anything like that from an emergency standpoint, we can go in and fix it. Parking lot lights, sidewalk repair, paving parking lot, same thing. Here I give $1.5 million and I say, Frank, you decide. Based on your needs assessment throughout the county, we've been doing this for about 4 years now, so we've been able to make a big dent in addressing our parking lots in majority of our high schools and now going down to our middle schools and beyond. Restroom renovations as well, so I kind of give him a pull and let him use that where he sees fit. PAYGO programs. So phase 4, and we know some of these are going, some of these haven't rolled out yet, and some of these are getting close. Initially, we were planning on $50 million PAYGO program. That's why we kind of set it up with a $12.5 million principal payment. Luckily, like I said before, sales tax dollars have been on fire. Because sales tax dollars come in, I'm able to be surprised. We can go up to $60 million and cover additional projects. And so we're able to bring in Orange Beach Elementary School and some of the other ones. Also kind of give a little bit more of a padding on Silver Hill, bringing our total estimated on the phase 4, Silver Hill, Newton, Daphne 9th grade. Stonebridge, Newton, Daphne 9th grade, Silver Hill, and Orange Beach to around $60 million. Of the $60 million, we still have $44 million of the budget expenses. That's going to continue. A lot of that will be taken care of this year. And some of these, like Silver Hill, that will probably roll over into the next fiscal year as well. J. Larry Newton is pretty close. Stonebridge is projected to open next year. And Orange Beach Elementary, I know that they're finalizing some of the plans. Bids next month.
Cost of materials affected this at all?
It has. That's why I kind of added a little bit to Silver Hill. And that, yeah, and you're right. I mean, I was thinking Stonebridge was going to fall more in the. Stonebridge is the same exact design as Baby Net Elementary. We did Baby Net Elementary. Now, of course, Stonebridge has its gym, and Baby Net Elementary does not. But that came in around $18 million. So you can see that you did see some impact from material costs and those type things. These two are yet to be bid, so I think that's a possibility as well. The state bond issue, we saw that the Alberta gym was approved. That came in at about $6.9 million with the architect fees. That's probably going to run over $1 million. Again, we can cover the excess of that locally to make sure we can keep those projects on track. Spanish Fort Elementary, there was some back and forth with the contractors. We were a little bit worried that they were going to pull out. All indications now is that they're going to continue and honor their existing contract. I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case just last week. So, again, that came in a good amount, and so we're covering some local to address all of that. And again, there's 32.7 here. We're going to spend all $33 million because both of these projects will cover the entire state bond there. And again, the big reason why Spanish Fort Elementary is so much is because of the land prep. I mean, they're having to do some substantial land prep that is not typical like we've seen in Bay Minette and Stonebridge and Mathis and those type things. And that increased it by like $6 million. Go ahead, Frank. Yeah, and then tying in demo on top of it. So don't want anybody to think, why is Spanish Fort getting so much? Again, it's the site package. It's really the same type rooms and model as we're doing across the county. We just have a everything about Spanish Fort is very challenging from a site package standpoint. So, I mean, we had to build the Spanish Fort High expansion like hanging off the side of a hill. So, all right, the CareerTech High School, the board has approved the $50 million in 20-year bonds. Like I said before, ARP funding is up to $15 million. I think we can use some of this to not only do the CareerTech High School, but to do some equipment at the Foley building as we're looking to really expand some of our CareerTech offerings down there as well. Total building cost to be determined. This one has to be a little nervous. I do think we have a good plan and that we can bid out the site package and we can hopefully get that done this fall. And then bid out the building maybe in March, April. Hopefully by then we'll see some of our material costs kind of get back down to a more normalized method. So I think that's a very good approach. The $50 million is based on $250 a square foot. And if you saw that virtual walkthrough and all the glass, and I was like, whoo, it looks nice. Woo! So anyway, so I mean, honest with you, I'm holding money back. Just like for these last projects that came over and above the budget and came over and above the state, came over and above some of the PayGo, the benefit of us making transfers from the general fund to the capital project, that gives us the ability to have that cushion to make sure we can keep all of our projects on schedule when we see those unexpected things. And typically what I've done is that I've taken a 2-month reserve and anything over that I've been transferring over. And that has allowed us to do a substantial amount of cash projects that we've been able to compete without a pay-as-you-go or any type of bond. And that also allows us to cover all the overages here.
Is that, John, going to cover also some anticipated expansion or at the new Foley building?
So that's a good question. So I think we're going to be able to cover that in this fiscal year, so that's why I didn't put it in next year's fiscal, but I'm actually buying that using the half-cent sales tax. Again, that has exceeded expectations as well, and you can use it for building and capital and maintenance, so it falls under the provision. That's what I did with the virtual high school building, the old car dealership. I was able to use the half-cent to purchase that. And so I also monitor that, and when that exceeds expectations, and obviously our utility bill is going to be good because it's so hot in here. And so, so when we're able to move some money around, then we can pick up these programs. And then I can go to Mr. Tyler, I can go to the board, I can go to staff and say, hey, we have this available. What are you guys thinking? Touche. Woo.
You're doing great, man.
Woo. What are we looking at, Tom? Two more slides.
1 hour, 51 minutes.
Again, this shows the general fund. Again, you'll see this. This is my first slide that I show at every single financial update. So again, my whole point in this is to tie everything together. I don't want to sit here and do a giant update every single month, but I want to do a big comprehensive one so you understand where I'm coming from on my monthly updates. So hopefully this has been helpful, but this is general fund. Last year I stood up here and I said, we were looking at a deficit. That's what I said. I said, again, but this is out of our control. We have a fund balance. The fund balance is in place to handle these unexpected circumstances. And that's what we did, knowing that we're back healthy this year. So again, it's not just me. I ride everybody, and everybody does a great job respecting kind of the constraints that we have to work with. But again, so so what I do, the first slide of every month, I say, we have operating revenue. So for the general fund, operating revenue of $323 million, operating expense of $318 million. Gives us an excess balance here. I do think this is going to increase because, well, I'm hopeful. We continue to be very promising on a sales tax basis. Also, a lot of things in the budget, they may be budgeted, and many times the actual expenses come in under. Bringing us to a fund balance of $67 million. And boom, that is it. I've printed these out, I think. So by law, I'm supposed to have a public input sheet. No one's ever taken. I used to print out like 100 of these, and I would just have to throw them away. So I've done 3. If anybody wants one, you'd be the first one to ever take one. But the point of this is to do a comprehensive update here. Let everybody kind of absorb everything. This PowerPoint is going to be online. The budget book's going to be online. And then I would ask if there are any questions, anything, board members, staff, anyone from the public. The point of the second budget hearing is for me to stand up and address those questions. The second budget hearing is going to be before the work session on September 14th. All the budget information can be found at bcbe.org/accountability, and feel free to email me. And that's it. Woo!